Excellent. So welcome everybody. I'm Steve Van Tile. I'm the community manager with the Academic Data Science Alliance. You're here hopefully to see a career panel on data science in the biomedical industry with our lovely panel members who we'll introduce in a moment. First, I want to give a couple of pieces of introduction about Academic Data Science Alliance and the Career Development Network. And some logistical information about the panel today. So Academic Data Science Alliance is an organization that builds communities of academic data science leaders, practitioners, educators, and academic adjacent colleagues to integrate data science best practices in higher education. So we have a lot of activities that we take on, including a number of special interest groups, a career development network, which we'll talk about in a second, and a leadership community newsletter and other activities. So if you want to learn anything more about the Academic Data Science Alliance, you can find us at academicdatascience.org. That link is also in that shared notes document. The Career Development Network is a subgroup within the Academic Data Science Alliance that supports professional development of early career data scientists. Most of the members in the Career Development Network are early career data scientists within 5 or 10 years of receiving a PhD, and who are working in academia or industry. But we're here to sort of support those early career researchers and scientists with the unique needs that data scientists often have in the workplace. Logistics for today. So please stay muted during the panel. We're going to take questions from you in the Zoom chat, and we'll capture those and ask them during the open Q&A session or section of the panel. You can also raise your hand, use the raise hand feature if you'd like to speak up, but we're going to try to keep most of the audience participation via Zoom chat. And as with all academic data science events and activities, we will be adhering to the Academic Data Science Alliance Code of Conduct, which has a link there, as also linked on our website. And maybe Megan could drop a link to the Code of Conduct into the chat in Zoom. There's nothing surprising in that code of conduct, but it's probably worth taking a look at some point. And if you have any code of conduct related or other problems, you can feel free to reach out to me or to Megan Atkinson, who is also with Academic Data Science Alliance and on the call today. So our agenda is to get through this introduction, which we're almost done with. And then we're going to give a moment for each of the panelists to introduce themselves, who they are, and where they're coming to us from. We then have a number of questions that we've sent to the panelists ahead of time that we can work through. And then towards the end of the session, we'll have kind of a free-form set of questions from the audience that we'll capture through the Zoom chat, as I mentioned. So here are our panelists. Before I move to introductions, are there any questions from the audience at this time about logistics? Perfect. Oh, there may be a question here. No, there's not. Okay, great. So what I'd like to do is to turn things over to the first of our panelists for introductions. We're going to go to Yen Lo, and then Andrew, Eric, Vanessa, and Anisha. So Yen, why don't you take it away? If you have slides, feel free to share screen. If not, go ahead.
Hey, let me try sharing the screen. Do you see my screen? Do you see my screen?
Yeah, we do.
Okay, cool. Yeah, I just thought, a slide could just quickly summarize where I've been. So, at the top is just some of my formal education. As you can tell, I've spent, they're kind of heavy on healthcare and some quantitative science. So even though my bachelor's was in engineering, I found that a lot of skills that I learned then on differential equations and so on actually came in pretty handy later on in my data science career. Since then, I've kind of focused on stats and then into informatics. So a lot of these started before, I guess, data science was even coined as a term, but mostly I see that I use data to solve scientific problems, and they kind of span my core interest in chemistry and human health. And I think at all the logos here, there is sort of one outlier. I would just say everything here is very healthcare centric, and they kind of in a way have built on my career, even though I have not actually had the deliberate plan to say, I want to work for the 4 different Ps, which are pharma, payers, policymakers, and what's the last one? Providers. But somehow along the way, I've kind of collected that experience and found that they really help me understand the healthcare landscape and to see how the whole healthcare system has actually come together. So right now I'm with Atropos Health as one of the founding team, and this opportunity actually came along through my postdoc. This is a brainchild of my this is the third startup of my postdoc advisor, and it's just really nice to join him on this journey to kind of revisit the past to get on this. And a little bit about the outlier, I had spent some time in tech, and I found that to be a huge eye opener. The education, the diversity that I've absorbed from physicists, economists, and so on has been a great education for me. So I highly recommend that detour if you have a chance. That's it for me.
Excellent. Do you want to relinquish your sharing, and then Andrew can jump in if he has?
Yeah, hi everybody. My name is Andrew Fiore-Gartland, and I now call myself a biostatistician and computational biologist, but it's been a winding road to get here. So my bachelor was and interest in undergrad was in biology, and I did a biology PhD focusing on neuroscience and understanding visual perception, but was already doing a bunch of coding and sort of, but never had much rigor in stats. And towards the end of that, which was also a long journey in itself, decided I wanted to get more into, I could see the long arc of my academic interests and research that it, wasn't going to get applied and sort of interact with society in my lifetime, at least. And so I wanted to find some more connection to the work I was doing to have it be more applied and relevant. And so I ended up switching at that point to do a postdoc with a biostatistician at Fred Hutch, which is where I'm now, which is a not-for-profit research institute in Seattle. And I'm in the vaccine and infectious disease division and focus on developing statistical methods and then implementing analytical methods for vaccine-related data. So we get health data from vaccine trials, trying to understand why and how vaccines work or don't work. Originally mostly focused on HIV, then focusing a lot now on tuberculosis. And then of course, everything changed with COVID, but nothing changed because I studied vaccines. So I'm just studying COVID vaccines. Yeah, so I consider myself kind of a statistician now because I do a lot of trial design and kind of the basic, and have worked with a biostatistician faculty for a long time. I'm now officially I think my role is called a senior staff scientist, which is kind of like a non-tenured track research scientist at Fred Hutch. And I'll leave it there.
Great, thank you.
Great to be here.
Awesome, good to have you. Eric, do you want to go ahead?
Great, thank you. Can you see my screen?
Yes.
Okay, awesome. That actually was a great segue, as you'll see, because I started off as a biology major as well and went into statistics and then biostatistics. So quickly, these are slides I borrowed from another talk of mine, but I started off in the Philippines, where I was born and raised, and we moved to the States when I was around 9. to California. From there, I completed an undergraduate in New York, and then found myself back in the Bay Area. And then from there, I got super interested even more in statistics, kind of like what Andrew was saying, and decided to pursue a doctorate in biostatistics. So I did that in North Carolina, and then found myself back in the Bay Area. Yeah, go Tar Heel. There's another connection. So training wise, I started off in high school in Los Angeles, where I got interested in neuroscience and neurobiology. That's really my core scientific interest, the study of consciousness and all that stuff. Wasn't a very good student, but anyways, different story, different time. So I then did my undergraduate at Cornell in neurobio and animal behavior. At the end of my time there, I switched into applied statistics because I realized, I really like the data analysis and design aspects of what I was doing. So then, like I said, I decided years later to go back to pursue a doctorate in biostatistics, and I ended up doing a postdoc in a related field. And then sort of to wrap up, so I started after all the first few iterations. I had a bachelor's and then a master's in applied statistics. I went into pharma and clinical trials for about 5 years, worked as a master's level biostatistician, and then shifted into public health during my doctorate. My degree is a doctorate of public health. And then during the postdoc, I got introduced to behavior change methods and behavior change concerns. And that that brings me to where I am today, where I work on health tech and digital health. And I currently work at Evidation Health, which is, I just love working here. It's great. The teams are great. It's just so great to work in such a nurturing environment with not just smart, but really empathetic people who are really, aligned with the mission and treating participants in our studies ethically as well as each other. So I could keep gushing, but I need to find more negatives, need to balance out the ones with zeros. So on that nerdy note, I will stop there and take this off.
Excellent. Thank you, Eric. And we're still missing Vanessa, but we'll just jump straight to Anisha for an introduction.
Oh, let me share my screen. Do I have to make it big?
That looks good.
Sure. Okay. So hi, I'm Anisha. My undergrad was weird. It was in aerospace engineering and applied math at UCLA. And I thought like planes were really cool, but I also clicked on the first engineering major on the drop-down list when I was applying for college, and then never like switched out of it because it wasn't bad. But during this time, my friend got sick, and I realized that we didn't know anything about the brain. So in between UCLA and my PhD at Berkeley UCSF, I worked at MIT at a neuroimaging lab, so I could kind of transition out of aerospace engineering and be a little more biology focused. So then I did my PhD, and I focused on multiple sclerosis and using neuroimaging to try to figure out how this disease is progressing. And during that experience, I learned that data science was a thing and very necessary because I was working with thousands and thousands of brain images. And what's really frustrating is, we are training image segmentation algorithms to measure lesions in the brain caused by MS. And it's so hard because, you spend all this time training this algorithm, but like a 5-year-old can trace it on an image in like a second, right? So I learned, my research focus was really about, can we find ways to combine the strengths of humans and computers so that we don't have to spend all our time on automated algorithms that still make really dumb mistakes that a human being would never make. But on the other hand, we need to find ways that humans can work with computers without getting bored or exhausted from just tracing a bunch of things all the time. So then I went to the University of Washington, the eScience Institute and the Institute for Neuroengineering to work on this, strategy. And that's where, I don't know if you can see my mouse, but my claim to fame is that I made a Tinder app for brain images. So we needed people to rate a large amount of neuroimaging data, but to look through every single slice in the brain is really time consuming and no one really wanted to do it. So kind of as a joke, I made a little Tinder app where you just take a single slice of the brain and you swipe right if it looks good and you swipe left to fail it. And it got like viral on Twitter to neuroimaging people, but still I'm going to count it as my social media claim to fame. And from there, we were able to train an algorithm to automatically, you know, classify these images as good or bad quality. So this kind of led me really nicely to my current job at Octave Bioscience, which is a multiple sclerosis. We're trying to develop a multiple sclerosis care management platform. And as part of that platform, we have an MRI service where we provide MRI reports to neurologists that have quantitative information. So not just radiologist evaluation of an image, but we actually measure how many lesions are there in the brain, how big are they growing? And from there, you know, our goal is to have these actionable MRI reports. So it's kind of come full circle where I'm going back to multiple sclerosis research, but in an industry setting. That's it for me. Donna,
Wonderful. I think I had heard about the brain tinder previously.
Yeah.
So you are indeed internet famous. Excellent. Well, thank you all for being here and joining us on the panel. We do have, it seems like, a pretty diverse set of backgrounds, although everybody's converging in biomedicine, which makes sense because that's the panel we're having today. So I'm going to run through some of the questions that we sent ahead of time to the panelists, and I'll ask the questions, and then panelists, if you just want to unmute yourselves and we can kind of do this conversationally, or if things get messy, we can use the raising the hand piece, but I'll try to moderate fairly well. So let me start with our first question that we sent ahead of time, which is sort of about getting a job in data science and about your career progression. So how did you find out about the current job you're in? Where was it advertised? And generally speaking, in your experience, how do job seekers find positions like these?
Can start.
Yeah.
I did mine was kind of an in-person cold call. I looked up some people that I was interested in their work. I went to some talks, and when I found the person that I thought was doing really interesting work, and just went up and just tried to track him down afterwards, because he had ignored multiple phone calls and multiple emails, of course. And I think that this just happens. And it turns out, he's not a rude guy. He's got a lot, he's really busy. And that can actually be the secret, I think, to success as well. Like if you can be kind of independent about it, then if you find someone who's really busy, they probably have a lot of work for you to do. And so then it can be a good foot in the door. But yeah, that's how I got started.
Great.
I was a postdoc, by the way. But
Excellent. Eric, Anisha, or Yen, thoughts on that question?
Yeah, for me, I got lucky. At the end of my PhD, the founders of my company were doing their research, and I met them then, but I was very against the idea of industry for no good reason. I just didn't know what industry meant. It's just like this word that's said, but none of my advisors or people on my committees had really worked in industry. So it was just this term. And I was like, no, I don't do industry. I also wonder if, I was getting my PhD at the time of Theranos, that's when Theranos was blowing up. And, in the bioengineering program at Berkeley, there were professors who were like, I don't know about this Theranos thing. It just doesn't make sense. And then turns out it never actually worked. Right. So I kind of had this impression that industry, they don't know what they're doing, right? The people in academia know how to do real science, which, it was an N of one, and I didn't really talk to anybody. So I met the founders, and then I went off to do my, data science postdoc. And then I realized that the research question I was interested in is just better suited for industry. It's about efficiency. It's about saving people's time. It's about scaling. And I didn't think that academia necessarily cared about that at the time. So happy where I am. Yeah.
Excellent.
I want to jump in on that. That's actually a great tie-in. Again, y'all are providing some good material here for ties, but kind of like Andrew's story for me with the postdoc, it was very similar. I cold called a bunch of folks towards the end of my doctoral program. And this was a cold call to someone that would eventually become a really good friend of mine, even attended my wedding at my postdoc. It was my mentor, and they did similar work, but it was literally, you just pound the pavement. This is somebody doing interesting work. I tell people it's, it's kind of like dating. It's just, you just have to go on the date. You just have to do the cold call. You just have to contact the person to see how it goes. It's so hard to tell, like on paper, how it'll go. And so much of it is, I'm going to be working with this person and building a relationship. So I love that approach. Just put yourself out there. And then the second tie-in to Anisha's comment was N of 1. So you mentioned N of 1. I got into, in my postdoc, I on my own got into self-tracking research and stuff with wearables and Fitbits, and in particular N of 1 studies. So it was a nice word that was thrown out. But I built that up there, and as I went to these conferences around digital health and wearables, I met the chief data scientist and co-founder of the company I'm at now, Evidation, and we got to talking, and so that again is another example of putting yourself out there, going to conferences, talk to the people you think are doing interesting work. And I went for a first round of interviews after my postdoc was over. I had a 3-year postdoc. There wasn't quite a fit. They wanted to make me an offer, but geographically it wasn't going to work out. 2 years later, I was actually laid off from my first startup that I was at. Great startup. I really got a lot of experience in, but a bunch of us were laid off. But it was kind of a silver lining, a blessing in disguise, because Evidation opened up a brand new spot right around the same time. And so I've been at Evidation for the last 1.5 years since then. So yeah, put yourself out there, cold calls, good stuff.
Yeah, and I second that blast from the past, because that actually happened in my case. I left my postdoc probably 6 years already. And then one day, my advisor, just we got in touch, and he said he's starting up another startup. And it was very much in line with the work that I had done with him before. And the timing worked out great. So I guess, it's really about, sometimes it's timing, sometimes it's geography, but, maintaining these connections and really just putting yourself out there, you greatly increase the opportunities that are available to you.
That's great. I'm going to actually go off script already because I'm interested in this particular aspect. So what does cold calling look like now? I mean, cold calling has that name because it was about calling someone on the phone, but is this happening through LinkedIn, or is this happening through wandering up to someone at a conference that you have seen before? What does that process look like, the cold calling and the networking? Because it sounds like it's pretty important.
Yeah, I guess what I meant was just that I didn't have any connections into the field that I was going into, and I didn't try to use. I had a network of people from my graduate school and everything, but these were new people to me, and they weren't in my network, and so that was the only way to get access, was to just go seek them out. So that's sort of what I meant.
Great. Anyone else?
It's been similar in my case too. You just kind of, it involves like reaching out on LinkedIn. I've realized somewhat recently that one of my extroverted qualities when I'm being an extrovert is I go on LinkedIn and I try to connect with people as a form of procrastination, which is awful, but then it's like, oh my gosh, I have a large network. That's cool. And it really helps, right? Like one of the nerdier things I got into while preparing for my doctoral program was I started looking into graph theory and this idea of like 6 degrees of separation and the power of acquaintances. It's super important when it comes to like finding leads in your career, definitely. So yeah, there's that. Also, just like literally, I told somebody I was at a conference and there was a group of people giving a set of presentations that I was interested in, but I wasn't in that circle. So, and they kind of formed a circle after the presentation, and I almost literally elbowed my way in there. And I was like, hey, that's very interesting. So also physically at conferences, it's going to be awkward at first, but you get better at it over time, so just embrace the awkwardness.
Excellent. All right, I'm going to jump to this section about preparing for careers, and I'd like maybe everybody on the panel to reflect back on their education and their postdocs if you've done one, and sort of thinking about where you are now. What do you feel like maybe you would have done differently had you known where you were going to get to? What types of things would you have done in your education to prepare yourself for the type of position you're in now?
I can say, but I think actually my path was fairly accidental. I thought that you come in, for my my PhD, I was going to do a certain dissertation. For me, then if I had tried to plan one for myself. So before I did my PhD, I was actually working as a pharmaceutical chemist, organic chemist actually, with some statistics thrown in. So when I did my doctoral research, I had thought, I'm going to do something that's more related to my major in chemical engineering. But in the end, I ended up working with a computational chemist and a toxicologist that really married all my interests. And with that, it unlocked the world of machine learning for me. Otherwise, I'll still be working with DPQs. And so I would just say being really open to possibilities, a little bit like what Anisha mentioned, like you're saying, oh, industry, but actually the more you find out more about it and being open to that possibility opens a whole new world.
Yeah, following up to that, I think that during grad school, if I had just gotten an internship or something, just to know what this industry word meant, I think I would have ended up in the same spot where I am now, but I think it would have opened my mind earlier on, and that would have been good for me.
That's great. What about Eric or Andrew? Any thoughts on some kind of revisionist history?
I mean, I guess reflecting on something that I think has been valuable along the way was that I did have one semester of like formal education in computer science and coding, even though I was focusing on biology at the time in college. And I think I still draw on that. Like, I think, there's amazing tutorials out there and that you can follow and kind of pick up so much in code. You kind of copy bits in here and learn packages and things. And it makes it so easy to learn a lot of machine learning and kind of coding these days. But I think that like there's some fundamental stuff with coding and understanding how computers work and algorithms, and like there's some things there that you can learn in like a semester of that real formal that I still think is valuable personally. And then I guess the other thing, I'll just say something that controversial that I think I still kind of go back and forth in my head. And I think it applies to this section, so I'll just say it now. But in academic science and trying, I received some advice a number of years ago about how to be successful because I was finding that I was like kind of 1 foot in biology and 1 foot in, computational work and statistics and having a hard time finding where to fit in, right? There are very few data science divisions or departments these days. And I wasn't going to have a lab. I kind of made that decision. And but I was not a statistician. I still, like I said, I was even in my introduction, I'm like, well, I call myself a statistician, but I'm not really, like it's still like clearly a struggle for me at 40, right? And that's because, academics are really, they hold on to what they call themselves in these PhDs, which is strange, but it's been slow to change. And so one of the advice I got was, well, if you really want to be a computational person, you need to take X years and just be computational, develop a tool, and just be, a statistician or a computer scientist. And then if your passion is really, biomedicine and science and whatever, and those are the questions you want to be asking, you don't fundamentally want to develop methods, you can do that. But that you're not going to be able to build a research program academically unless you have that, like, this is me, I made this method, in statistics or something. So I don't know. I'm still plugging away, but I do wonder. I never did that really. I sort of stuck to the applied, build a method here, apply it there, build a, but I do wonder whether to give that advice to people or not. So
I was going to say, I really love that because I totally feel that that sort of inertia too from academia, where we're trained to sort of think like, oh yeah, I am in this bucket. This is what I do. I develop methods going this way. And yeah, there's this fun interdisciplinary thing out there. That's cool. I'm still going to go this way. Right. Whereas like my experience in data science has been super great for introspection and learning, like on a very deep level. If you've seen any of my blog posts, never thought I'd be a blogger, by the way, but like the early ones are like ranting about like, this is how you do it in statistics and this is how it must be done. I'm a statistician, damn it, like can't blah, blah, blah. And then, you know, as time goes by, you start to see my testimony being like, well, that's not necessarily the best way to do it. So in fact, like, to kind of maybe soften it for you, Andrew, like being a statistician, and I've discovered can be a liability because you think like there's so overlapping with data science, like isn't just this like an extension of statistics from my end of it? And I'm learning that no, like it's having statistics skills are very important. Being a statistician can be a liability if you think that's the way it should be done. Things I'd love to have learned. I never took like a CS course. I would love to have taken CS courses. Code review, like pacing out your timeline and your pipeline for deliverables to clients. These are what matter in data science, in my experience. And you can't spend all the time as a statistician or any academic like noodling all the way down into like dotting all the I's and crossing all the T's. It's not how data science works. And yet there is some abstract version of that, right, across this field. So, I don't know, maybe it's like a mix of like business science and like data exploration or something like that. But yeah.
That's great. And that touches on something I wanted to follow up about, because I know I've heard people talk about this as they're looking for jobs. Data science is a new enough field that we're simultaneously seeing thousands of job posts for data scientists, but also positions that look like data science positions, but that are called something else. And so how do you avoid this trap of, just searching for data science jobs when you should be searching for data science and other types of things? What are some strategies that folks could use for that level of the job search?
I think it helps to understand the company. So usually I go a little beyond not just the job description, because sometimes I find that the job description is a bit either over-specified or just sometimes just way too broad, but kind of understanding, especially for startups, to see their trajectory, to see their growth and the kind of products they offer, and other job ads as well. They kind of offer some clues as to the different roles they're hiring. Sometimes they have separate job ads for machine learning engineers, and then they have separate ones for, say, biostatistician. And this is quite common, I think, in pharma setting. And just seeing the related job post and seeing where you fit in. And sometimes it actually helps to talk to someone within it to understand how the teams are organized. And perhaps you even get a little primer about what kind of role you might actually fit in that's actually not posted there.
Interesting. Anybody else?
I just agree with what Yen said. I think especially for small startups, I mean, it's very broad what you're doing. So I would say, my job title is data scientist, but I'm doing a lot of data engineering, and I don't quite know what the definition of data science is anymore, because I'm just kind of broadening, and we're a small company, so you kind of do a little bit of everything.
I think, yeah, even in the scope of this conversation, I've started to realize maybe data science writ large is more like an MBA, where it's like, that's great, you want to hire an MBA, but for what? I mean, like there's MBAs who focus on airplane design, on imaging, on, like lots of different things. So yeah, going to the actual organization and talking to people there is helpful, because those job descriptions can be helpful for the skills, and they kind of contextualize, right? I mean, you're clearly looking at that organization or that job set, but for the skills, they can write a skill set down, but it really helps to talk to somebody if you can.
That's great. Speaking of skills, thoughts on what skills are necessary? I know that's a super vague question, and it's sort of intentionally vague, but if you could, maybe folks want to chime in a little bit about hard and soft skills that are important in your positions, and how you go about acquiring those.
I'll start. I think data visualization is both a hard and soft skill. I think you have to be able to code your data visualization. You have to also tailor it for your audience because your audience is very different than what you're used to in academia. So I was really obsessed with like the rain cloud plot where you show, this KDE distribution, you show the individual dots, you show a box plot, and it's like you see everything all at once. But it ends up just confusing people that aren't data scientists. And when you're talking to, like providers or payers, and that you want to be able to tell the story, as quick as possible, get to the point, make it punchy, you don't want to confuse people by just showing all the data at once. So, having arrows that point to parts of the plot that are relevant, little things like that can make a huge difference.
Anisha, are you sure oh, go ahead.
Oh yeah, just to add on what you said about plots, I've seen instances where, there was a lot of innovation, inventiveness that went into creating new plots, but then in the business setting, sometimes it's like, they're looking at it, it's like, where's the legend, where's this and that? They take, it just takes like the extra 30 seconds to navigate themselves, and sometimes that could actually end up being a turn off. So yeah, sometimes the simplest may actually be the best. They want bar charts, pie charts. So I think there is room for some of these. And sometimes I've seen complex plots where they actually overlay some of these simpler stuff that you can actually tell a more complex story with just simple elements. Yeah.
I was going to jump in quickly. Because to Anisha, I was like, are you sure we don't work together? Because you literally described my experience on my first full project. I was like, look at this awesome rain cloud plot with, you can see the scatter plot. And the client was like, where am I supposed to look here? Yeah. But the data scientists are like, that's great. You can see everything. Right.
Yeah.
Yep. Different audiences.
So, yeah, really being able to read this variety of audiences sounds pretty important. What other skills do you think employers are looking for? If you're hiring, what types of things are you looking for on those resumes and applications? Or is it all data visualization?
I can start and say we're hiring. So although we might be at the end of our hiring stage for now, but we look for those skills. So like data visualization and on things like that. But the most important is really like communication. So how are you good? How is your skill at communicating just between other teammates? And you start to get a little flavor of that in the interview because we move so fast that we are trying to find, and we're small, we're still relatively small. So we're trying to find folks who are already really good at communicating, especially through like conflict and differences and disagreements. So that's a big one.
And just to add on communications, I think like what makes it really effective is the ability to communicate at various levels, not just to your technical peers, but all the way, right, to stakeholders, whatever they need to hear. And I've seen, people who can come up with really good analogies to actually make something really technically complex into something that, I get it, and get so drawn into it, actually want to brainstorm with you and so on. So that that skill in school and for science, because so much of the focus was on publication, conference presentation, and it's really more to a very specific audience that sadly actually makes up a really small percentage of the people we ultimately meet in industry. Yeah,
that's great. Andrew, did you have something?
Yeah, I was going to say that when we thought about hiring people, I'm often thinking about like a specific kind of data that I know we're going to get a lot of. And so I'm looking for someone who's had some experience with that data or something similar to it. So maybe it's, it's deep sequencing data of some kind, and that what I'm looking for either in an interview or maybe in their blog posts or a demonstration of like kind of going beyond like being able to follow a script of like in a pipeline of like, okay, well, this was the raw data and this, and sort of reproduce that versus being able to formulate a new question about the data. Can be simple, doesn't need a lot of domain knowledge, but just like a new question, and knowing that that can or cannot be answered by the data, and then looking for that complete cycle of like, okay, I have this question, here's what I'm going to need to do the data, and here's how I manipulated it. Just sort of showing that like real data literacy with the type of data that I'm interested in someone having skills with, and I've seen that in people who have done a blog post like a Jupyter notebook or something with, in fact, we even had that as part of our interview, I think, at some point, where they had sort of seen what kinds of data we were interested in, and there's lots of that data around, and instead of just reproducing whatever paper it came from, they had just asked one simple new question about it, and just seeing that thought process was like really helpful to me to see, okay, this person is curious and they're literate with the data, they can really work with it.
That's great. See, Eric and Yen are unmuted. Is that to chime in, or should I move to another question?
I'm good.
You're good. Okay. So just a reminder to the folks who were still on the call, if you want to drop questions into the chat, you can do so. We have one question there, and we'll get to that in a minute. So I'd like to ask each of you, what are some of the rewards and challenges, on the other hand, of the position that you're in and the type of work that you do? What's great and what's tough sometimes?
I guess for biomedical data, one of the key challenges always is like data confidentiality, dirty data. So there's some aspects on the data that's difficult that I'm sure most of you have faced.
Yeah, building off of that, privacy and ethical concerns as well are just kind of a general set of challenges. Also, standardization of the metrics you're trying to analyze is another challenge. So even just reconciling, say, two variables against each other from two different data sources, that's a challenge, because frequently we're pulling from either data sets that are broad and have different structures, and are at different scales, collected at different scales with different competencies of data collection. So maybe some are collected by a government agency and they have pretty high fidelity to the signal you're trying to capture, but others are collected by like a financial firm. And so you have to sort of figure out how to merge stuff. Yeah, I had another thought, but something, I'll find it at some point.
Yeah, Andrew, go ahead.
Yeah, I was going to add to the lack of standardization, the dirty data, the small data too. In biomedical, human data is almost always a small n and a huge p these days. Like we just have a lot of features. We're sequencing, or we're collecting single cells, or we're doing something. And so, if you're really into like state-of-the-art machine learning, it's usually pretty hard to apply that to biomedical, human at least, data sets, because clinical trials are kind of small compared to the number of clicks on a website or the number of Netflix searches or something like that. Like, so I'm interested. I read up on some of the neural nets and things, but it's very rare that I ever have a chance to apply them. So if you're really into that stuff, then just be aware of that. And on the other hand, the reward is that we're very close. When you're working with human data and clinical data, you're very close to its application. Like every little thing that you learn is potentially something that's applicable to human health or human experience, and so it's fun to be on that edge all the time.
Yeah,
and I think a lot related to.
You go ahead.
Go ahead first.
Okay, I was just gonna follow on what Andrew said. I think it's really rewarding at the end of the day to actually feel like your work is, we create these MRI reports for patients that are coming in to a clinic. So it's like due on Thursday, the patient's coming in. We have to get our data out there by then. So it's really rewarding, but it's also stressful because, that's not how publications work or anything, right? You publish your paper when you're ready. Now it's like, well, you're building a product, so you have to be ready at a certain time. And so that's one thing that I struggle with. And the other thing that I kind of struggle with is kind of growing a team, because I'm not doing everything myself anymore, right? Like in academia, it was just like me kind of just going away at it, just focus on my one question or problem. And now it's like, if I need help with something, I have to remember, I can ask for help. I can ask for resources. I can, we can hire junior data scientists to help me out, but then it's like letting go of the control of like, well, I can do it much faster, but I can't do everything. So I have to like assign tasks to people and let go of the control. It's hard.
And building up on what Anisha and David and Andrew had mentioned is some of the data challenges that we face actually creates the need for very specific methods and tools that are used in biomedical sciences. And I think there are a lot out there. For example, you want to standardize data, make them interoperable with each other. There are ontologies and there are certain standards, right? But we want to kind of be ahead of the curve and adopt them. So, and I've seen also a lot of instances where I think, it's just so, if we go by first principle, it's so tempting to try and sort of do it from scratch and sometimes reinvent the wheel accidentally. So kind of specializing into that area where you find that there a lot of these methods have been invented, even published, and so spending that time to do some of the lit review, go search like some complementary packages, libraries out there can really just give you a head start.
Yeah, I wanted to quickly summarize that into like these two buckets I'm seeing, which is one bucket of activities in data science is the actual data question. So it's the science, it's the research, whatever. And primarily these are exploratory data analysis questions or hypothesis generation questions. So in my experience, there's not a whole lot of literature you can lean on to actually formulate and try to answer the business or the science question. At least a lot of the companies that come to us, they're on these like edge cases. So you have to build this confidence that, in academia, it's like, look at all this literature here. I'm going to set myself up to go this way. That's not going to really happen much in the world that I'm in now. So there's the research component and there's a process component. Okay, that's great. We have this vague research question, but there is a crap ton of literature and processes that none of us alone knows about because we've been trained differently. But it's like, oh, I can go to like the Odyssey system to standardize data sets. Oh, how can we use that in our team and our process building to improve the process so that our vague scientific questions can at least be kind of standardized in this process. So those are like two buckets, I think.
That's great. Thank you. So I want to follow up on something I think Anisha said and Eric just hinted at. This sort of difference in team dynamics in industry versus in graduate school. I mean, thinking back to my graduate school days, I remember hearing other grad students say they never wanted to work on a group project again. But it's sort of like everything is a group project. And so, but how do those groups and teams differ, and what kind of takes some getting used to when you come into an industry setting and start to do this kind of work?
Yeah, I can start. There's one of the things is in the team setting in industry, a difference is that you're all kind of experts in your own fields that are working together to address these vague questions. And so because of that, I found one of the skills I really am building up is teaching the fundamentals very quickly to other people of various skill levels and backgrounds. So it's like the fundamentals of statistical thinking, not like the highfalutin, whatever. So that's a skill set I think that's more present versus when you're in, like from my postdoc days, everybody's in this kind of field. So we're kind of talking about the method that's up here versus the fundamentals. So also being able to appreciate the need to really know those fundamentals and communicate them well. That's a skill that I've had to learn.
I felt very empowered working as part of a team. And I guess, one of the best experiences I had was maybe outside of biomedical, working as part of Netflix. This was my first time not being a scientist. I mean, I was a data scientist, but I work among engineers, data visualizers, so a lot of specialists, right? And because we were working together as a team, I think it allowed us to actually dream, go for projects, because we know we've got people on the team to work on our respective parts. And, when you succeed together, it's very exhilarating. So teams are great.
That's great. And anyone else?
Yeah, I was just gonna, I think there was at some point at which it seemed like coding, I had this opinion that like coding was going to be ubiquitous, like that, oh, well, everyone will just kind of code. It just seems like it's taking off, right? It'll just be another way we communicate and every scientist will have to do it. And I think more and more that hasn't happened, you know, like, I mean, maybe everyone can communicate around code a little bit and sort of understands a little bit about methodology in computer science, but basically the coding has gotten more and more complicated. So if you knew a little bit of coding, which wouldn't get you very far these days, right? And so collaboration is just everything. I mean, you have to, so I just, yeah, lean into that, that don't be shy that you think you maybe don't know enough of this or don't know enough of that to be successful. Like, you know, you lean on the things you know, and then lean on the people that you need to sort of work with that will teach you the things you don't know yet. And I love that part of my job. Yeah, stay curious.
Yeah, I love group projects. I love being on a team. I do the work in the group project. I'm not just saying that because I'm the one that stops off anything. But I think everyone on our team, they have their unique strength, and it's really cool to see everyone come together. And the focus is really on, I don't know, it feels like something bigger than a publication where you're the first author. Like, it just feels more meaningful than that. And it feels like you can do bigger things. So that's really exciting. Going on for collaboration and kind of going back to an earlier question about what skills you need, Git and GitHub, being able to work code collaboratively is one of those basic skills that I think everyone should learn. And when you're looking for jobs and you're like messaging me or sending me your resume on LinkedIn, like having a GitHub link so I can click and see, you know, what kind of things you're interested in. And if, you know, if you're contributing to an open source package, for example, I can see the types of contributions and how, you know, you interact with a group. That is really helpful.